Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Breakout Session 2, Unpacking Multiculturalism, What Conditions Promote Respect, Togetherness, and Success. If you think you're in the wrong room, it's fine. Today, this is the room that's going to be very engaging and exciting. Do you agree with me? Yes. I'm Michelle Tay, the Executive Director of the Singapore Kindness Movement, and it is my honor to be moderating this important conversation today. We are gathered here in Singapore, a city-state known for its multilingual signs, multiple public holidays for different faiths, and chicken rice served right next to nasi lemak, biryani, all within the same hawker center. But multiculturalism is more than just coexisting, having the similar cuisines or festivals. It's about how we live, work, worship, and disagree and grow alongside with one another, especially when our identities, values, or histories don't always align neatly. Today, we are privileged to have two distinguished speakers who bring their rich and diverse perspectives. Professor John Barry, Professor Emeritus at the Psychology at Queen's University in Canada. Professor John is renowned for his foundational work and alteration and intercultural relations, and he will share insights from decades of research on how cultural groups can coexist, adapt, and thrive in societies. Professor John, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and I also thank the organizers for inviting me to share some of my knowledge on this topic. I'm going to use Canada and its multicultural policy as a case study, elevated to empirical research following some discussion of basic concepts. There was discussion this morning by a number of people about different facets of what we mean by multiculturalism. The first is the sheer demographic fact of having people of many different cultural backgrounds, first, second, third, fourth, etc. generations. The second is how a society deals with that fact. How do they manage to live together successfully in a plural society? And the third is what people think about the policy and the fact. And this is where the role of psychology comes in, because we deal with people's views, attitudes, and beliefs and behaviors concerning these multicultural facets. The situation of Canada, which I said is a case study, is pretty obvious. We have had First Nations established for millennia, who themselves constituted a very, very wide diversity of cultures, from north to south, from east to west. We had Vikings come around the year 1000. They only stayed one generation. Then the British came in 1497, and a few years later established the first European permanent settlements in North America. And since then, we have had people come from all over the world, so that approximately a quarter of our population were not born in the country. And in some cities like Toronto, somewhat over half of the population of over 3 million were not born in the country. So we had to deal with this fact, and we had to deal with the increasing presence of people of diverse origins. So in 1971, as was mentioned this morning, our then Prime Minister, Trudeau, announced a policy of multiculturalism to try to organize our relationships along certain basic principles. The basic principles are that diversity is of value to all living systems, biological systems. The more variety there is in any system, the greater is the opportunity to respond to new challenges and to come up with successful strategies for living now and in the future. What sets the Canadian multiculturalism policy apart, however, is not diversity, which is shared by all understandings of multiculturalism. It's that an equal component is the equitable participation of all ethnocultural communities in the life of the larger society. Diversity and equity go hand in hand, because if you have diversity without equity, you get forms of segregation, which is what led European leaders to declare multiculturalism has failed, which of course wasn't a failure because they never tried it. They only focused on the diversity component. Equity without diversity leads to assimilation. Everybody becomes the same and are indistinguishable culturally from each other. Together, that defines multiculturalism in the world's first policy in '71 in Canada, and it continues to be the major understanding of multiculturalism in our part of the world. So the policy has these components, but it has a third one because of the particular linguistic nature of Canada, and that is encouraging the learning of each other's languages in order to allow everyone to participate in the life of the larger society. In 1984, the federal government asked me to examine these components and asked me the question, to what extent do they form a coherent whole? And I produced a figure that I will share with you now that attempts to show that from a psychological point of view, these components not only cohere, but they give rise to testable hypotheses that can lead to successful implementation of multiculturalism. So in the upper right, you see the goal of the policy is to create a society in which there's mutual acceptance and respect and inclusion of all people who are living in the society. That's the goal. The three components that I've already mentioned, the upper left is the continuation of cultural diversity over generations so that communities thrive and can be themselves to the extent that they wish. The lower left is the participation and contact in an equitable way so that no one group dominates the other. And the lower right is the communications component, the learning of languages, particularly if English and French, which are the two official languages, but other languages also have a formal place in society. From these four corners, we have created three hypotheses which are testable, and I'll share you some results of these. Across the top, we have something called the multiculturalism hypothesis. This hypothesis is that when people feel secure in their cultural place in the larger society, when they are confident that they continue to live culturally the way they wish, then they're in a position to accept those who are culturally different from themselves. So the arrow goes from the upper left, security and confidence in one's cultural place, through to the right, the goal of the policy, inclusion and mutual respect. The converse is that when in the upper left, cultural communities feel threatened, are discriminated against, their right to be who they want to be is questioned, then this will create negative relationships, which is, of course, contrary to the goal of the policy. So this is one hypothesis which we have been testing for many years. The second hypothesis is down the left from cultural maintenance through to equitable participation. And the hypothesis here is that when people are able to engage in both their heritage culture and to participate equitably in the larger society, they will have more positive intercultural relations, and they will have greater success and well-being in their daily lives in the society. We call this the integration hypothesis. The third hypothesis goes from lower left to upper right. Colleen Ward mentioned this morning, and that is there's a lot of research that shows when people can participate equitably in the life of the larger society through daily contact in their communities, in their cities, then this will lead to greater mutual acceptance as well as based upon greater mutual awareness, and that arrow goes from lower left to upper right. And so for many years, and most recently in a book called Mutual Intercultural Relations, we have been testing these hypotheses. So to repeat, you can just read that. The multiculturalism hypothesis is the opposite of threat. When people's place in the society are threatened, then it leads to negative intergroup relations and exclusion. Integration hypothesis, when people are engaged in both their double identities or multiple identities, they do better in the society. And third, the contact hypothesis. So what do we know empirically about these hypotheses? Well, in this book I mentioned, 17 societies were examined, and we sampled both from the ethnocultural communities, which some people call minorities, I don't, and from the larger national society, which some people call the mainstream, which I don't. And in both these samples in these 17 countries, we had surveys done at the community level to examine the validity of these hypotheses. So for the multiculturalism hypothesis, we have three measures of the sense of security. One is cultural security. I feel that being amongst people who are different from myself is an advantage. It doesn't threaten me anyway. Economic security. Immigrants are not taking my job. In fact, immigrants create employment. And personal security. I feel safe when I go out on the street at night and don't worry about people who are culturally different from me being a hazard. And of the 39 possible tests across these societies, we found support for the multiculturalism hypothesis in 36 of them. So substantial support, only 3 with no support, and there were no contrary findings. The other 2 hypotheses had similar levels of support across all of these samples. And so we conclude that all 3 hypotheses, which are based on the Canadian multiculturalism hypothesis, are valid in the societies in which we tested. Unfortunately, not in Singapore, so I can't report any specific evidence from here. But we did include India and China as the Asian representative samples. So inclusion, not in conclusion, but the term inclusion, we have done surveys using Statistics Canada data, nationally representative samples using the notion of sense of belonging. So we consider that when the sense of belonging is high, they feel that they are included in the society. And we have an annual survey using a sense of belonging measure, 10 points. And analyses are carried out separately for Quebec and the rest of Canada. What we found was that there is a high sense of belonging both to the country and to the province in both Quebec and in the rest of Canada. Highest sense of belonging was reported for ethnocultural groups of South Asian, Filipino, West Asian, Latin American, and Black groups, mainly from the Caribbean. Lower for Korean, Chinese, and Southeast Asian groups. We don't know why that is the case. It is important to know how high the sense of belonging is, but it's also important to know whether this has any impact on their well-being. So we measure self-esteem and we measure self-rated mental health. Sorry, life satisfaction, not self-esteem, on a 10-point scale. In all cases, those with high sense of belonging to one or multiple groups, they have higher levels of life satisfaction and higher levels of self-rated mental health. So we also included, in addition to Canada as an object of belonging and the province, we also included a local community and religion. And the findings are shown here. So for life satisfaction, if the sense of belonging is above the midpoint for Canada, for the ethnic group, and for the religion, the scores are higher than other combinations, both for life satisfaction and mental health. If it's the Canadian sense of belonging and ethnic, it's somewhat lower. Canada and religion, somewhat lower. Ethnic group and religion, somewhat lower. Canada only. Ethnic and religion, sorry, it should be ethnic only, and then no strong sense. And you can see, scanning down those columns, that the means drop really substantially. So what we conclude from this is that a high sense of belonging, a feeling that you're included in the community, whether it's the nation state, the province, the community, or your religion, then the greater is your well-being. So we have, I think, shown a couple of things here. One is that policy can lead to testable hypotheses, which then be studied empirically in a number of different countries. And the results are generally in the direction that the policy is a valid way of attempting to get people to accept each other, mutual acceptance and inclusion. And secondly, that when people have high levels of inclusion in multiple communities, the nation state down to the local community and religion, then the outcomes for individuals are substantially more positive than when you have no sense of being included in communities. So I'll just conclude by saying that many countries in the world are now under threat, where their very existence is questioned. This is true in Canada. There are attempts to incorporate us into our neighbor in the south. People in West Asia are being told that they're not a real people, they don't have a state. People in Ukraine are told that it's a fictitious boundary and they don't have a state. So these sense of threats that exist in many parts of the world, I think, will undermine the conditions for which we all want to see multiculturalism and personal well-being and inclusion thrive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor John. We'll leave the Q&A for later in the session, but please do fill in your questions via the Pigeonhole QR link so that you can submit your questions online, because we'll only be taking that via the QR code. Yeah. Right now there are 4 questions, and I'll try and make sure we can answer most of the questions, okay? Okay, next up, may we invite Monsignor Reverend Indunil, Secretary for the Dicastery of Interreligious Dialogue at the Vatican, to give his presentation. This one.
How are you all? After lunch? In Italy, some after lunch, they take a nap. Dear friends, I stand before you today deeply honored to speak on a subject that is both urgent and timeless: cohesive societies and resilient futures, multiculturalism, inclusion, and social cohesion. On behalf of the Vatican Office for Interreligious Dialogue, I express my gratitude to the organizers for the invitation extended to me. Our theme calls us to imagine a world where diversity does not divide but unites, where difference is not a threat but a gift, and where the strength of a society lies not in the sameness but in solidarity. In particular, I want to reflect on this theme from the heart of Asia, a continent of countless cultures, religions, languages, and histories. Asia is home to some of the world's oldest civilizations and also to some of its most vibrant, diverse societies. Asia is the cradle of many of the world's great religions, has long nurtured multiculturalism, inclusion, and social cohesion. Religious and cultural traditions across the region have promoted enduring values such as family, compassion, hospitality, justice, nonviolence, care for creation, and reverence for the dignity of every person. These teachings continue to inspire millions today. Yet, this same region has also been scarred by internal strife, interreligious tensions, ethnic violence, and even in the past, genocides, conflicts that unfold both within the national borders and between neighboring states. Therefore, multiculturalism, inclusion, and social cohesion are not abstract ideals. They are lived realities or painful absence in the lives of millions. This paradox calls for a renewed commitment to the foundational values of our spiritual and ethical traditions. Challenge to cohesion, socio-economic, political, and environmental realities. Let us not be naive. The path to cohesive societies is full of challenges. Socio-economic inequalities continue to divide us. In many countries, rapid economic growth has been accompanied by rising disparities in wealth, access to education, healthcare, and digital technologies. The marginalized are often left behind, fueling resentment and division. Political polarization and ethno-religious nationalism threaten the fabric of pluralism. When identity is weaponized for political gain, minorities suffer and social trust erodes. Environmental degradation is another silent divider. Climate change displaces communities, deepens resource competition, and worsens inequalities. Without environmental justice, there can be no social cohesion. And tragically, religion, meant to be a source of peace, compassion, and moral guidance, is sometimes manipulated to justify violence and divisions. When the faith is co-opted by political or external agendas, it becomes a tool of conflicts rather than a force for unity. In this complex landscape, building cohesive societies require both courage and clarity. Courage to confront these realities and clarity to uphold the values that bind us together. Why do some societies succeed in holding diversity together and some others fail? The success or failure of societies in holding diversity together depends on a web of interrelated historical, political, economic, cultural, and moral factors. Here is a list of some of the most significant ones. First, inclusive political leadership and vision. Societies that succeed often have leaders who frame diversity as a strength, not a threat. Failure often happens when leadership exploits divisions for political gain. Strong, fair institutions. Inclusive institutions, law, courts, education, media, protect minority rights, and mediate conflicts peacefully. Societies fail when institutions are corrupt, biased, or unequal in access and justice. Third, shared national identity. Successful societies cultivate a broad, unifying identity that include all ethnic, religious, and cultural groups. Failure happens when national identity is narrow, exclusive, or ethnically defined, alienating others. Fourth, historical memory and reconciliation. Societies that acknowledge past injustices commit to healing are more likely to foster cohesion. Those that deny or suppress past harms risk repeating cycles of resentment and violence. Fifth, socioeconomic equality. Economic inclusion, education, jobs, housing, healthcare help different groups feel invested in society. When economic opportunities are distributed unequally along identity lines, tensions grow. 6, space for dialogue and participation. Civic platforms for interreligious and intercultural dialogue, youth and women's participation, and local governance help build trust. Absence of dialogue increases misunderstanding, fear, and polarization. Last point, cultural and religious values. Societies rooted in values like compassion, hospitality, and mutual respect across all traditions tend to fare better. Fundamentalist or exclusivist ideologies, religious or secular, often undermine cohesion. Without these interrelated factors, social cohesion becomes fragile, and when rooted in them, it endures. The way forward: dialogue, education, justice, and healing. So, how do we move forward? First, through interreligious and intercultural dialogue. Dialogue does not mean agreeing on everything. It means listening deeply, seeking common ground, and committing to peaceful coexistence and shared action. Dialogue must be rooted in respect, not only among followers of different religions, but among cultures, ethnicities, and languages. In today's world, right to speak one's language, practice one's religion, culture, and live without fear of erasure is foundational to peace. Second, through education, not only technical and scientific education, but also moral, spiritual, and civic formation. We need to educate for empathy, not just employment. Schools, universities, media must be spaces that shape bridge builders and peace builders, not bystanders. Third, through justice, including political and economic justice. Many tensions in the world are rooted not only in ideology or identity, but in inequality, marginalization, and exclusion. Cohesion cannot exist without equal access to opportunity, fair representation, and just treatment under the law. People need to see themselves reflected in public life and institutions. Fourth, through ecological justice. The climate crisis and environmental degradation disproportionately affect the poor and marginalized, deepening existing inequalities. Entire communities, especially indigenous people, are displaced, silenced, or harmed. Protecting our common home is not separate from social cohesion. It is central to it. As Pope Francis reminds us in Laudato Si, everything is connected. Peace with the earth is peace among people. Last point, we need healing. The wounds of colonization, war, discrimination, and historical injustice run deep. Healing requires truth-telling, public memory, apology, restitution, and rebuilding of trust. A resilient future must be rooted in honest reckoning with the past. To build a truly cohesive society, we must root our efforts not only in policy and programs, but in shared moral foundations. Across the world's rich spiritual and philosophical traditions, whether in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, Confucianism, Taoism, or the wisdom of indigenous cultures, we find enduring ethical principles that speaks to our common humanity. We might think of 5 precepts as a moral compass to guide our multicultural and inclusive future. First, respect for life and human dignity, upholding the sanctity of every human life and rejecting violence, hatred, and dehumanization. Second, commitment to truth and integrity, living and speaking truthfully with honesty and transparency in both private and public life. Third, stewardship and responsibility, caring for one another and for our shared environment with a sense of accountability that transcends self-interest. Fourth, justice and fairness, treating all people equally, ensuring that systems and structures promote equity and restore the dignity of the marginalized. Last, compassion and solidarity, walking in those who suffer and acting with empathy and recognizing the interconnectedness of all people. These precepts, though expressed differently in each tradition, converge towards the same horizon, a society where people live not in fear or division, but in mutual respect, shared responsibility, and hope. These shared values form the ethical frame of a cohesive society. They are not imposed by law alone. They are sustained by the moral imagination of community and faith. Conclusion. Hope from Asia to the world. Dear friends, the future of our societies will not be determined solely by economics or elections, but by the strength of our relationships, the depth of our compassion, and the courage of our convictions. Asia, with its ancient wisdoms and vibrant diversity, has much to teach to the world about cohesion and resilience. Let us dare to imagine a future where no one is excluded, where dialogue is the norm, where difference is embraced, and where peace is more than the absence of war. It is the presence of justice, dignity, and hope. Allow me to conclude with the words of the late Pope Francis, delivered during his memorable visit to your beloved country. I quote, "Singapore also has a specific role to play on the international level. Let us not forget this, which is threatened today by conflict and wars that has spilled much blood, and I welcome your noteworthy promotion of multiculturalism and a rule-based order shared by all. I encourage you to continue to work in favor of the unity and fraternity of humanity and the common good of all peoples and all nations in a way that does not exclude others or is restricted to does not exclude others or is restricted to your national interests." End quote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Indunil. He reminded me that, as the kindness movement, I should practice some form of gratitude. As we always say, gratitude is the best form of attitude. So if you would like to join me, could you give a round of applause for our two distinguished panelists here today? Secondly, I think we also like to take a moment to thank the organizers behind for the whole tech setup and for the upcoming 3 days conference. Please join me in thanking our organizers right behind. Thirdly, this morning, President Taman spoke about, the growing isolatedness of people today, for the fact that everyone here is physically present. There's someone beside you. Please give that person a round of applause, and thank you for being here today. Okay, I have quite a long list of questions. In fact, Arun actually posed a question about digitalization, but I'm not sure why it's showing up here. So Arun, if you're still here, could you please repost that question, because it was something that I was really particularly keen about on digitalization. But then right now we'll go up to another question. Perhaps you could look into the more technical questions, and we have one from Reverend Zhang Liyong. You could put that up. It's for Professor John. What are some concrete measures that the Canadian government take to integrate migrants?
Is it on now? Yes. We have many programs, but in a federation, jurisdictions have different roles. The federal government, the provincial government, and municipal governments all pitch in. First of all, language training, as we saw in that diagram, learning languages, the two official languages of the country, without undermining one's heritage language, is given priority to ensure that people fairly quickly can move into the economy and social life. There are employment services that are offered at the community level very often, but also at the provincial level. For example, in the community where I live, there's one on the corner of a street right downtown, and I walk by it almost every day, and I see dozens of people who are obviously recently arrived in the country lining up for services, employment services, social services, and so on. But the overarching policy of multiculturalism is one that advocates for the value of diversity and the value for participation. And I think this message, even though it's largely symbolic at that level, gives everyone a sense of hope that they can find a place after a period of adaptation in the new society. We have one of the highest immigration rates in the world. And as I mentioned, some cities are over half of people not born in the country. And this creates a dynamic, a cultural dynamic, religious dynamic, economic dynamic that essentially serves its own purpose. It creates opportunities in ethnic enterprises, small businesses, which are supported by special programs and so on. So at 3 different levels, we have a multitude of programs. There's also support for humanitarian migration. Refugees receive initial support for a period of a year. And this is divided between those who are government promoted or supported and those that are supported by other families or private organizations, including ethnocultural organizations. So, for example, in Canada, we have one of the largest historic Ukrainian populations in the Ukrainian diaspora, and in the last 2 years, they have been very active in providing services for Ukrainian refugees who have arrived. This was also true with the arrival of 40,000 Syrians a few years ago, and historically Vietnamese, Hungarian, Czech, and other communities that arrived to escape turmoil in their own country. So the ethnocultural communities privately and substantially offer support and service as well.
Thank you. Since we're on the topic about immigration, there's another question from Kay asking about, in a country like Singapore where immigration is important to economic growth, how can we balance multiculturalism but also maintain the national identity? I mean, Singapore is a small nation, we're only 60 years old compared to Canada, but how do you think we can maintain this sense of national identity and pride? He doesn't have an answer. But it's okay. I think there could be other factors depending on government policies based on your hypothesis that we could look at national identity. Next question.
Well, maybe I could comment.
Yeah.
Our last Prime Minister, yes. Trudeau Jr., declared that there is no single Canadian national identity. There's no single Canadian mainstream. Depends who you are and where you live. Okay. The people in charge are different from one region to another, whether it's in Quebec or in an Indigenous community. And we are, as he said, a nation of nations. We don't have a single national identity, which I think he said with a great deal of pride. And I agree with him. I think strong single national identities lead to or breed nationalism of the kind that we don't really want. So for Singapore, I would hesitate to prescribe anything. Small states have their own challenges. I've been working for many years in Estonia, and the question they had was, how do we deal with the third of the population that represent the Russian oppressors for the previous 50 years? And my advice was, you can't get them to love you if you hate them, so find a way to incorporate them into your new national state.
Thank you, Professor John. In fact, I just received a private message that one of the audience here is actually an alumnus of Queen's. It's an alumnus of Queen's. He studied there. Okay. Okay.
Not, but my whole family is.
Okay. If I could turn the question to Indunil. Let's see. Give me a second. Trying to work technology here. Okay, there is a question from Aaron where he asked about how can learning about other cultures such as acquiring another language or understanding intercultural practices, be meaningful and practical, so that it contributes to world inclusion and cohesion beyond just raising awareness? I think you have been an expert, or like to say a master of, facilitating interfaith dialogues. How do you think this could be more meaningful and practical beyond just raising awareness?
Yeah, I have been living in Italy for the last 20 years. I come from Sri Lanka. My mother was Buddhist before marriage, and all my mother's side, they are still Buddhist. So our next door neighbors are Muslims. This is the third generation, and we continue to live together. What we discuss here look theoretical, but so when you encounter, we call culture of encounter. Culture is a way of life. And culture you inherit, and also you receive the culture, and also you transform the culture. So you grow up in a culture, and then when you encounter other cultures, and then also it enriches you. Because when we grow up, we receive a culture from our family. And then when you are exposed to other cultures, also your perception of the other grows, expands, enriches. And then also it helps you to look differently. Especially learning a language. I speak Italian, I have learned French, and then learning a language is not merely a tool for communication. When you learn another language, it helps you also to penetrate the other cultures. Penetrating other cultures means penetrating people's lives, people's thought patterns, people's ideas, people's philosophy, religion. And in our office, especially, we promote interreligious dialogue. So culture of encounter also includes meeting of people belong to different religious traditions. And there you are deeply rooted in your identity, religious identity. You expose yourself to others. And then in this encounter, in this relationship, you come to know about your faith, and also you come to know about the other's faith. And then you come to know about the differences. You also come to know about the converging values. So you learn also to respect the diversity. There was a time we tried to impose our faith on the other rather than respecting the other's faith. So, and then we respect, and also you come to know that there are common values. On the basis of common values, we can work together for the betterment of the humanity. I already spoke about ecology. It affects everyone, people, believers, non-believers. There is a common cause that we can work together. And there are the social issues, peace, harmony, reconciliation. And so culture of encounter enriches you, and culture of encounter also helps you to promote culture of inclusion.
Indunil, you also spoke about, the path forward involves healing from historical injustice, with all going around in today's world, with the war and uncertainty. How can we truly heal from historical injustice?
When Nelson Mandela was released from the prison after more than 25 years in the prison, he said, "When I was released, I left behind all my hurt feelings in the prison cell. Otherwise, even though I am a free man, I would continue to live as if I am in the prison." So we talk about aftermath of a conflict, violent conflict, where people have suffered, where people have seen violence, where people have seen their loved one lost, where mothers have seen the death of their sons. It happened in Sri Lanka. We had insurgency, and then about 60 youth were killed, and then after that, civil war between Tamils and Sinhalese, many were dead. About 80,000 widows. So a nation with wounds, not only in Sri Lanka, all over. Recently I was in Cambodia. 1/4 of the population were annihilated within 5 years. That is about 2 million people. And then how can religion help to heal the wounds? First is, religion has the capacity to motivate the people to forgive. Because if you don't forgive, as I said in answer, you carry the wound. And then forgiveness also heals not only the victim and also the perpetrator, because this is the interreligious approach of healing is different from retributive justice. Retributive justice means that you did something, then you need to pay for it. But here we try to heal both the victim as well as the perpetrator. It doesn't mean that you forget about injustice. Then there is also, we need to address injustice. There is no forgiveness without justice. So justice issues need to be addressed. Truth telling has to be done. But at the same time, religion has the capacity to heal both victim and the perpetrator, and thereby to create a new humanity, elevate both to a different level. So we have seen it in different countries. In Sri Lanka, we have concrete examples. I will take one example from Sri Lanka. I saw people from northern part, war-torn area, come into southern part after the cessation of hostilities. They don't even speak the same language, different languages. But they were brought together. The villages, I saw it with my own Buddhist monk, religious leaders, others welcomed them with the band and all. And then they live together for a few days. Once they go back, they cry. Because sometimes you have grown up with prejudice. You have created an enemy. But when you come together, all those things disappear. And then there is healing and reconciliation.
Thank you. I see a few of nodding away in agreement, so I think they're in agreement with you. Another question for Prof. John from Sophia. She asks, what advice would you give country leaders who might not prioritize social cohesion within their countries over more important aspects like healthy economies, unemployment, etc.?
I'm not sure that this is a set of either or goals. I think social cohesion can come from promoting economic participation, promoting education, promoting community organizations. And these are other priorities, but I don't think that they exist independently of each other. So I think it's a false, not a dichotomy, but multichotomy, you might call it, to pit one against the other.
Okay. Since we're on that, what role do you think the community down here, beyond policy or institutional initiatives can play to promote everyday respect and cohesion in diverse societies? You could pull up the question for...
For the first part of the question, it is, if you are a true leader, then you need to promote cohesiveness, inclusion, because on the opposite, contrary, would means exclusion. And exclusion will lead to conflict, tension. Then, in the long run, it will affect the economy. So it will affect the development of the country. Country will go back. So if you really if you are a good leader, then you need to take care of the diversity, and then you need to include everybody to the political and economic system. Otherwise, everybody will have to pay a price.
To add to that, ethnocultural communities in Canada are very well organized, and they're funded by the federal government to promote their own interests. So bottom up, you get groups essentially raising hell when something doesn't seem to be right. So if immigration policy or settlement policy or education policy or health policy seems to be contrary to their interests, to exclude them, to deal with them unfairly, then they have a vehicle, an organization, to make their interests known and to promote their interests through the parliamentary system. So yeah, a lot of bottom-up activity can be very effective. But if there's no political will from top down, then you can raise more hell in a different way, perhaps by violent action, as we heard this morning. Some people are increasingly espousing action against instead of with government leaders to achieve their goals. I had one comment more on the question about integration. It was mentioned by the President this morning. Public education, to me, is absolutely critical. I think having distinct schools for distinct peoples are contrary to all of the goals of inclusion. Without wanting to offend my colleague here, we have this historical division between Roman Catholic schools and public schools in Canada. It's been eliminated in 2 of the provinces, the most Catholic provinces, but in one province it's maintained. So in a single community, on a single block, you'll have a public school and a Catholic school, supported by different tax base and fully funded where it's not supported by community taxes, fully supported by the provincial government. And you have rivalries, you have lack of interaction on the street that I think goes contrary to the attempt to integrate everyone into society. And you get divisions that are really anomalous. So for example, the laïcité movement, the laity movement in France and now increasingly in Quebec has forced people into different segments of schools. So I understand in France, for example, Muslim girls are going to Catholic schools because they're private and they're allowed to wear the dress the way they want to wear. So you have further divisions and the anomaly of Muslim girls in French Catholic schools because they can't dress the way they want in the public schools. So these, I think, are all contrary to the goals of inclusion and integration.
Thank you. Another question similarly on societal conditions. Do you believe that in today's climate of rising polarization and identity politics, what societal conditions do you believe are most crucial for fostering mutual respect and togetherness?
I think it was already mentioned. Education is very important. The President mentioned 4 types of education, and I would like to mention also 4 types of education. First, education means that you you have knowledge of a subject or syllabus, what you study. Apart from this knowledge, you also need to have understanding and knowledge about your own religion if you are a believer. And another type of knowledge is a knowledge to be with others, human fraternity. And another type of knowledge that we need today is also to be with the nature. So we need to learn to be with the nature. We also must learn to be with others, look at the others, be with the others as a friend with equal dignity. And also, if you are a religious person, then you need to have a knowledge about your faith, experience, and then also a fairly good knowledge of one or another religion, if neighboring religions, so that it also may eliminate the room for prejudice, because ignorance is the enemy of peace. Where there is knowledge, there is peace.
Yep. I'll just pull out another question from John. He talked about, in the modern world, every person is part of a different sectarian group, be it ethnic, religious, linguistic, or other identity-based groups. What is a healthy way to manage the multiple and sometimes contrary pulls that these groups exert on an individual? I hope you're not the individual that got exerted on.
The table I showed you with respect to sense of belonging, I think pretty clearly demonstrates that the more identities you have, the better off you are.
Yeah.
There is no contradiction between identities except some rare cases. So without conflicting identities, you can proceed towards your goals. Colleen Ward mentioned this morning that identity with the nation state and identity with your heritage group can sometimes be positively related, sometimes negatively. In a study of migrant youth in 16 countries, which I published a few years ago, we found that these identities are positively related in more multicultural societies, societies that promote diversity and equity, and they're negatively related in those societies that do not accept these two values. So I would suggest that having promotion of multiculturalism, diversity and equity increases the likelihood that your identities will be corresponding with each other, and we saw that the multiple identities lead to greater well-being and mutual respect.
Thank you. So our definition of multiculturalism is on having harmonious coexistence and meaningful interactions between different communities in plural societies. With the increasing world of digitalization of social relationships, how do you think people can have a sense of belonging when, everything is between the electron and the social space? People don't even talk face to face anymore, they just text.
The research that I've been involved in for many years is with the concept of acculturation. And a lot of that has been focused on international students. How do they move from one culture to another and succeed in the new culture, even if it's only for, say, 4 or 8 years? In the years of this research, the digital revolution arrived. And quickly, students realized that they could maintain home culture contact far more easily. So in the years I've been living in different countries, I don't think I ever made a long-distance phone call to my parents. It was just too expensive. Now you just flick a switch and you're home again. So digitalization has, I think, made it a lot easier to maintain heritage culture communication and commitment than it was in the past. And as we saw earlier, if you have both identification with and participation in your heritage culture and the new larger society, you have numerous benefits. So I don't see a digitalization during this process of migration as being anything other than a positive. But as far as eliminating in-person contact, where in-person contact might have its benefits, I think that has certain negative consequences. So not in this group, but this morning I saw possibly a third or a quarter of people on their phones during the president's speech. So they could have engaged with him personally by keeping eye contact and paying attention, but for some reason or another, they were on their phones and
They
doing
might be
something
taking notes
else.
on their phone, right? I would like to give the benefit of the doubt. Just like some of our friends here, they're on their phones because they're giving me lots of questions, which is posing right now, which is good. I'm hoping so. They're listening because they laughed, right? So I think we have a good audience today. Okay, another question, if you put it up from ICCS. Indunil, in your work of fostering interreligious dialogue across different faiths and cultural contexts, what do you find the most effective conditions or approaches that will move communities to mere tolerance to genuine mutual respect and solidarity? You know, I think even in Singapore, you know, it's not just tolerating. I think we are going beyond tolerance and more of harmony, right? How do we live harmoniously and not just tolerate you because, you know, I might not like what you wear today? How do you think, what are some effective conditions that you think have worked?
Yeah, I mean, interreligious dialogue is officially the Catholic Church started 60 years ago with the famous document in our time, Nostra Aetate in Latin. And in the course of 60 years, we have made many progress. So what is interreligious dialogue? It is not a debate that you try to win over the other or to prove that other is wrong. Interreligious dialogue is also, we say it is based on God. God is in dialogue with humanity. And then God speaks to humanity. And then in this dialogue, we have two characteristics. One is listening, other one is speaking. And then it says we also need to listen, go beyond the words, listen to the heart of the person. If it is interreligious dialogue, then you listen to the heart because the religion touches the heart of the person. What comes from the words is what one has experienced, spirituality. And also while you listen to the other, and also you also need to speak because you are also have some experiences, religious experiences. Then you share your experiences. So interreligious dialogue, what we do is we go beyond tolerance. It is mutual respect, understanding, mutual respect, and mutual collaboration. Let me give you a concrete example. Last month, we were in Cambodia. So Cambodia, you know the history, and it is the majority Buddhist country. And we had a Buddhist-Christian dialogue, the 8th one, in collaboration with the Catholic Church and also the Buddhist. And then 2 days of academic conference, and then we had 50 foreign participants and about 100 from the country. Third day, we had field visits. And there we went to a village where you have a church, you have a temple. And then this priest or the bishop has helped the temple for the formation of Buddhist monks, the small monks, and he has financially helped the formation of the Buddhist monks, finding, because they need to learn languages, Pali and Sanskrit. And then with COVID, he was sharing us, when COVID was there was a problem of food. And then he has helped them to have a greenhouse, vegetables. So one is education, helping. You go beyond your religion and help the other, so that you can also see that other grow intellectually, spiritually. And when you have a food problem and you help. And then he has also contributed to build some Buddha statues. So he says, this I contributed. And then you also contribute for the spirituality, worship of the other. And then he has also gone with the Buddhists on a pilgrimage to Buddha Gaya, India, where Buddha attained enlightenment. And so here we have a concrete one of the examples where it's not tolerance, it is respect, and respect in all sense. And then you you are rooted in your own faith, you believe in your God or whatever may be, and at the same time you open to the other, respect the other, and help the other to grow. So interreligious dialogue is that mutual respect, mutual understanding, and also mutual collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe he has answered at least 3 questions on my pigeonhole list. Yeah. Another question for Prof, or either one of you, from Anon. What do you think that works in Singapore in a model that can be applied in every country worldwide, but with a cultural context? Maybe we could pull up that question, because I'm not quite sure what exactly is he asking. Okay. Oh, there we go. Oh, he has a few questions, actually. Okay, so we'll use this one first. Singapore is a great example of multiculturalism. How can we be able to export this model to the rest of the world? And what are some challenges that you think will prevent us from being at the forefront of social cohesion?
Perhaps I could start with the first. Psychology is a science, and most of us believe that psychological processes are shared species-wide features of human life. This is the universality principle. No way of knowing or thinking or believing or emoting has been found in one society that cannot also be found in other societies. And a parallel, no society has unique psychological processes that we've ever discovered. But given this underlying communality, cultures shape how these processes are developed and later expressed. So the question with respect to exporting the Singapore model to other countries can be answered in parallel to that. So I reported earlier in the afternoon that we believe we've found 3 hypotheses that receive widespread support. That if you find your own place in a society as a member of a cultural community, then you can accept those who differ from yourself. Conversely, if your place is threatened, you will have negative orientation towards those. That is a universal principle in terms that I just expressed what universality means. Or, secondly, people who have multiple identities have more networks, more social support, more belief and knowledge systems than those who have only one, and their outcomes tend to be more positive. That too would be an example of a universal principle. But cultures shape these. They are developed and expressed differently in different cultures. So in answer to the question, using these observations, I think that the evidence is now clear that societies that promote diversity and equity do better than societies that do not. But how Singapore did it, or Canada did it, or any other country did it, is not necessarily exportable. The principles may be, but the practices will have to be tailored to the historical, cultural, economic conditions, including the history of colonization, in which there are leftover cultural features that have to be contended with. So yes, the basic principles I think can apply everywhere, but they have to be tailored before any carte blanche export is possible.
You wanted to say something?
Just to add, when I visited first time in Singapore, I visited the Harmony Center. And then what we can learn from Singapore, learning, unlearning, relearning. If you go to the Harmony Center, that also has a narrative or narratives. What happened in the past, what were the consequences, and how can we avoid it? Learning. We may have learned many prejudices, biases. We may have learned hurt feelings from generation to generation with the socialization. Negative things are also transmitted with positive things, knowingly or unknowingly, in the family. Learning. It may be written history. We have learned negatively. And then we need also to unlearn what we have learned wrongly. And then you need also to relearn that reimagination of the other. Because we have learned something negative, and then we have to unlearn it, and then we have to relearn it. Relearning means that you think newly, differently of the other's culture, individually or the community. So in that way, what impressed me, as I also concluded my presentation with the quotation of late Pope Francis, Singapore is sort of a model. I fully agree with you. You cannot apply it everywhere, but you can learn. You can learn, you can apply the principles. Because today I come from Sri Lanka and I live in Italy, we see that today multiculturalism is becoming a problem. And then how can we address this? And then some of the principles, some of the examples we can learn from others. And Singapore, I think, is a model country in that sense.
Thank you, thank you. I'm learning so much from this, and I might need to unlearn this in a few minutes to relearn. Professor Murray, reflecting on your own journey working across cultures and societies, in fact, he's already 25 years past his retirement. So if you could give him a round of applause, he's retiring right now. Was there a personal experience that you really profoundly shaped your understanding of what it really means to foster respect and togetherness in diverse communities?
Retirement is just a fiction for most of us in the academic game. You never give up thinking or asking questions. So yeah, 25 years ago I quit my job in order to concentrate on my international work rather than being in a classroom at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. So my own experiences began as a member of the only English-speaking family in a French-speaking village in rural Quebec. Right from the beginning, I was an outsider. And right from the beginning, I was aware of linguistic and cultural differences, and I was aware of prejudices. And one of the first memories I have is encountering a guy I knew, a French-Canadian. He just came up to me and said, "The French are better than the English or Jews." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "My priest told us." So these early experiences really shape the course of what your interests will develop in. And I think the second experience is that after high school, I worked 4 years as a merchant seaman in various capacities on ships, coasting in Africa and in the Arctic. And those also shaped my later research endeavors in Africa and amongst Inuit and northern indigenous people. So these early experiences, I think, with other cultures, will really put you on a path towards questions concerning cultural diversity, universality, and how people navigate their lives when they move from one to another. And so a lot of my research has been on the acculturation process. How do people who are raised in one culture manage to reestablish in another? And secondly, what does that do to the quality of their relationships with people of other cultures? So it's not a unique experience, because I think most people in my field, cross-cultural psychology and intercultural psychology, have all had these early encounters that push them in this particular direction. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but I encourage you all to get out there and see the rest of the world as you're doing by coming here to Singapore. But there's a very much bigger world out there to enjoy and experience.
Thank you. Maybe for Indunil, if you could share in the audience, what role do you think can everyone here today play to help build, this multiculturalism of identity and inclusion? Is there something or any advice for our people here today?
Yeah, the first thing I think is friendship. It's very simple, because I shared with you our next door neighbors are Muslims. This is third generation. So every time I come from Italy, I bring something for my nephews and nieces and for them. They are now two big girls. One is, both of them married. So this time also now, the second one has a child, so I brought from Italy something for the baby boy. It's our friendship. It comes naturally. And then when I come and then we go for a dinner out, we continue our friendship. In psychology, in sociology, they say, what are the factors that determine social cohesiveness or group cohesiveness? One factor is similarity. You have similar ideas, and the other one is complementarity. What is important is frequency of contact. Because we met today, and then if we don't meet often, and then we may lose friendship also. Yeah. So one is friendship, and the second one is genuineness. Because you need to be authentic in your relationships. And then when you are authentic, genuine, and then there is also trust. Because people then open to you, share, because friendship has different levels. We call intimate friends, mango friends, and then we know they are friends, but there is no deep relationship. And then comes also diversity, respect. They are Muslims, we are Christians, we have not changed our identity. We are deeply rooted in our identity. We respect them, they respect us. For Christmas, we send them lunch. For Ramadan, they send us food. So small gestures. And then all these things, automatically, we have come together. We have come closer. And nothing can separate us. So when it comes to interreligious dialogue is also that it's a journey. Because earlier we had hurt feelings, maybe prejudices, fears, ignorance, and then first contact, and then you lay the foundation, and then you walk together, and then you come to know the other gradually, and there is friendship, there is trust, there is mutual respect, and then that leads also to mutual collaboration. So, for example, we came here for Christian Taoist dialogue a few years ago. We organized with the Taoist Association. We went to Thailand, Bangkok with the Buddhist. We organized the Buddhist-Christian dialogue. And 50 years ago, almost, they their chief incumbent, the Buddhist monk, had met the Pope, and then we commemorated the 50th anniversary of friendship between Buddhists and Christians in Thailand and the universe. So simple things, and then it grows, and then it also leads to cooperation and friendship and trust.
Thank you. It reminds me of the slogan that we have at the Singapore Kindness Movement. It's called, "We are neighbors by chance, but friends by choice." So we can't really choose who our neighbors are to be, especially in Singapore's public housing, you know. It might be of another race, of another religion, staying in a high-rise building, but we can all be friends because that's a choice that we all can make and do. Back to the question on pigeonhole, this is to Professor Berry. It's a bit technical, but what are some of the challenges that was faced when the multiculturalism policy was introduced and implemented, and how did you overcome those challenges?
One of the challenges was from the province of Quebec, amongst French-speaking Canadians, who saw themselves being, to use another term, relegated or reduced to being just another ethnic group, when historically they are one of the founding peoples of the country. And so they began to distance themselves from the policy and have created some alternative ways of living with their own increasing cultural diversity by prioritizing French language and French culture and French values over those of other ethnic origins. It's very similar to the policy in France, which they are emulating. But by and large, most ethnocultural groups were strongly supportive. And in the early 1970s, with colleagues, we did our first national survey of support for multiculturalism. And we created scales of security, I mentioned earlier, of acceptance of multicultural principles. And by and large, there was large-scale support, and other organizations have repeated these surveys over the years. I have done one more recently. And the level of support has, in fact, increased. There's been a tailing off of support for immigration because of housing crisis. But support for multiculturalism as a basic core value in Canadian society has not only not diminished, but has increased. On the other hand, public intellectuals have raised questions about the sincerity of the policy. Is it a kind of divide and rule strategy to keep ethnocultural groups in their place? In other words, identify them as, for example, special interest groups, which we can placate by giving grants and support, financial support, and not have them raise troubles for the real commercial and elite interests of the country. So these critiques come from public intellectuals who, I guess, believe them, but by and large, the communities, cultural communities, are very supportive, and the general Canadian population is generally supportive, and increasingly so. It's considered to be, in national surveys, top of mind questions. What do you think defines Canadian society? Public health care and multiculturalism come out first and second over the years. This is who we think we are.
Okay, the clock is still ticking. We're 4 minutes away. If we could invite each of you to maybe share a minute or two about, any final thoughts of our conversation so far.
I had another thought about public education. In the last few weeks, I've had two grandsons graduate from university, one from the University of Toronto, one from McMaster University in the adjacent city. First grandson graduated in science, which includes computer science. And the graduating list by surname was over 80% East Asian. The other grandson graduated from the School of Business, and by surnames of the list of graduates, over 50% were either South Asian or West Asian. This means to me that integration through higher education is well on its way to success. In fact, the average income of immigrants, second generation in Canada, is higher than the average income of people who've been there for many generations. So integration through education, integration through economic success, I think tells a very strong story.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need to promote culture of dialogue. Where there is dialogue, it eliminates the space for fear, ignorance, and also thereby for tensions and conflicts. Culture of dialogue can be, our field is interreligious, and religion can play a major role in today's world. Unfortunately, today some try to blame the religion as if religion is responsible for what is the everything going on in the world, ignoring the root causes. We need to address the causes, socioeconomic, political factors for conflicts, and religion today is still a force in the world, in the society, and then we need to have that real compassion, the kindness that religious teaches. We need to have forgiveness that religious teaches. We need to have the mutual respect, the dignity of a human person that religious teaches. If we can walk the talk, and then there will be multiculturalism, there will be cohesiveness, there will be inclusion, because all religious leaders taught, founders, and then the prophets that we should respect the other and we should include the other, embrace the other with diversity. So the religion today has a role to play as bridge builders, peacemakers.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much from today and hope you guys have learned something too. This morning, President Taman spoke about, the polarizing effects of the media landscape, especially of social media. So if I may take the chance for everyone here, if you have learned something new today, something inspiring, please post it on your social media, on LinkedIn. Let's make social media for good. Remember the hashtag ICCS2025. And with that, thank you, our two panelists today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.